Hello guys, welcome once again. In this video, I'm going to show you how we can use constructor in C++ and what is a constructor. So first of all, what is a constructor? A constructor is a special member function of a class that is created when you create the object of the class. And the name of the constructor is always same as the name of the class. So that is how you can recognize constructor. So let's see how we can declare constructor in classes. But first of all, one more important information. Even if you don't declare a constructor, C++ will create a constructor for you for a class automatically. So we have written this class, there is a constructor for this class which is automatically created even though we have not written any constructor for this class. Now let's see how we can declare constructor for a class. So I have already told you constructor has the same name as your class name. So I will just copy this, and in my public access specifier I will just write this, and I will pass no parameter inside this, and I will give these parentheses. So this is called a constructor. Okay, so it has the same name as class, and it is always initialized when you create an object. So let's verify if it's created or it's initialized when we create the object or not. So I will write some message, I will show some message. So for example, I will write we or you are in constructor. Okay, and I will write end line here. By the way, if you don't know how this class works, I have shown you the explanation of this class, book class, in the last video. So if you don't know how to declare a class or what are these functions in this class, I have explained these things in the last two videos. Okay, so what we have done is we have declared a constructor, and we are showing some value inside our constructor, or we are showing some message inside our constructor. Right now, let's create an object of a class. So you already know how to create an object of a class. You just need the name of your class, which is books, and give the variable name or object name, which is, for example, book1. Okay, and even though we are not calling any variable, we are just creating the object. And I already told you that constructor is called whenever object is created, right? So even though we are not writing anything, let's see what happens. I will just compile my program. Now I will run my program, and you see here it shows you are in constructor. That means what I'm saying is true, right? So a constructor is called whenever you declare the object of a class, and it is created automatically. Now we don't really use constructor to show some messages, right? It should have some specific use. So generally we use constructor to initialize the values of the variable in the class, right? So for example, what you want to do is you want to initialize the value of this variable called name. Okay, we already created set name and get name functions, and we need to initialize this name with some value. Or otherwise, for example, if somebody writes cout this, he calls this book1 dot get name, what will happen? because we haven't initialized any value to the name, and we are calling this get name. What happens here is, I will just close this and I will compile this and see, let's see what happens. You see here it's showing some error because we haven't initialized any values, and this function does not matches this function. Let's just change this, and now let's compile the program once again and let's run the program. And you see here you will not be able to see any values here because we haven't assigned any values to our string variable called name. So why do we use constructor? We generally use constructor to initialize some value to the constructor. And how we can initialize the name value, or initialize this variable name? You can just pass a parameter called string, because this variable is a string, right? So you can just pass string, for example x, and what you can do is you can call this set name function here. Set name is equal to x, for example. Okay, so whenever you create an object, it will initialize and you have to give some name to your object, and that object will go here, and then that function will assign this value to name, and indirectly you are assigning the value to name variable. Okay, so we have initialized name by initializing this constructor. Now whenever you pass some argument in the constructor like this, for example, we have initialized our constructor with this string variable, then you need to initialize your object with an argument which is string also. So I will give the name of the book C++ tutorial, for example, and now when we run the program, compile it and run it, you can see this book1.get name gives you the name of the book, right? And what we have done, we have simply initialized this value with a constructor like this. Okay, so once again, why do we use constructor? We do use constructor to initialize value, and when constructor is initialized, or when constructor is created, whenever you create the object of the function, and if you pass argument to the constructor, you need to pass the same data type argument to the constructor to initialize it like this. Okay, now one more little concept I want to show you is, for example, you want to create a different object, for example book2 object. You want to create a book2 object. We have created already book1 object, so we will create book2 object, and we initialize this with some other name. So book name will be this time, for example, Java tutorials. Okay, and once again you call this book2.getName. So what do you think what will happen? Because this is a different object and this is a different object. So one might think that whenever you create a second object of a class, it will overwrite the name you have given to the first object. But this doesn't happen. Every object you create, it has different or its own set of name, set of function. So this object will have independent this variable name, this function get name, and this function set name, and this has nothing to do with this object. This object will also has its own name, get name and set name function, and this object will also have its own name, variable and get and set functions. Okay, so when you compile this program, both object will be initialized and they will work fine. C++ tutorial, Java tutorial, and they are independent of each other, right? So it's just an instance of a class you are creating by object, and they are not related to each other, or they are not dependent on each other. Each object is independent of each other. So I hope you have understood the concept of constructor in C++, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and bye for now.